And we are back, YouTube. So little late night video, just thinking about some stuff, and I just wanted to go ahead and get it out there. And plus, it's always nice for me to talk about things as well. So this video is gonna be about a couple things in particular that I experienced that were kind of a byproduct of my childhood trauma, being eating disorders, drug and alcohol abuse, risky behavior, and these things show up in a lot of people. For instance, we'll talk about eating disorder and specifically. I was diagnosed at 16, maybe 15, with anorexia nervosa, which is, you know, restricting your caloric intake, maybe over exercising to compensate for any calories taken in, yada yada. Think we all know what anorexia is. Um, it had started, of course, teenage years is a hard time for kids going to school, especially I was an overweight kid. Lots of things played into it. But the biggest thing I would say was, first off, eating disorders are anxiety disorders. From my experience with anorexia, which has been on and off for 13, 14 years now, is, it's a fight for control, one way or the other. Is, you find that one thing. For me, that was, counting my calories, obsessing over numbers, obsessing over food, obsessively working out, finding new ways to avoid eating or ways to fool people into thinking that you weren't starving yourself. And it was a struggle for control, which what did I not feel in my home life? I felt like I had no control over anything. I didn't even have control over my own body, over my own mind. So, and I would say anxiety is kind of, I guess, yeah, like the absence of control, you know what I'm saying? And that's how you feel you can almost subdue the anxiety, I guess, is if you find a part in your life that you can control, then it feels like you have the anxiety in control. Lots of lots of bad things to go with that because of course, um having control over something like that doesn't make your life better, just like turning on the light doesn't help your bathroom that's flooding because of a broken pipe, or mowing the lawn doesn't help a leaky roof. You know what I'm saying? Um, it was a fight for control. The anxiety, you funnel it into that. So you got all this anxiety noise up here. You find an outlet for it. So you begin funneling it all into there. And then it becomes, all about food, all about exercising, all about weight, all about, how your body looks, standing in the mirror for 5, 6 hours a day thinking, okay, I get fucking, did I gain an ounce? Can I see it? Whatever. Um, Drug and alcohol abuse. Similar. I'm saying fighting to control one thing in life when you have no control over anything. And as a child, what do we have control over? Very little. And some of us, just about nothing. The household I grew up in, I didn't even have control over my likes and dislikes. Like, it was always something of the sort of, you're only doing that because this person does it, or you only like that because other people like it. Like, I wasn't allowed to have my own autonomy for anything. I only did things because other people did them. I only didn't do things because other people didn't do them. Nothing was my own. So, one thing to fight for control for, the eating disorder, I'm the only one that can control that. Drug and alcohol abuse, that was fighting for control of, I guess, how I felt, fighting for control over the dark cloud that loomed over my life, constantly. Um, and like I've been open about this with pretty much anyone that knows me. Drug abuse, collectively for about 5 years, it was methamphetamines, cocaine, pills, Xanax, Klonopin, Valium. 2 straight years of alcoholism. Drank before that, but moved off of methamphetamine. Boop. There's alcohol. Exchange one addiction for another, and that's better, right? Not really. It was all a way to try and gain control over how I felt because I felt inside very out of control. Um, for one thing, not a not a great choice, but we're not here to talk about that. These things, even though it seems like, oh, okay, well, stimulants, cocaine, methamphetamine, whatever, those aren't going to relax you. Like, what do how does that correlate? Okay, yeah, alcohol and benzos might chill you out, but how do you explain the stimulant use? There we go back into that old eating disorder. So, for one thing, methamphetamine use really got to be a thing with me because I tried it, realized how easy it was to then lose weight because after, consecutive years of starving yourself, you're exhausted, your your health isn't shit. You just in general don't feel right. You feel like shit, you feel run down, you feel fatigued, you get sick easier, all of these things. And that was a way for me to bring my energy back, to try and exude this false sense of confidence and security and everything, because stimulant use really is, it's euphoria that is like the main, I guess, draw to it, just like any drug, I guess. But is you just get this overwhelming feeling of like, okay, we're okay, you're okay, this is fine, this is great, everything's great, everything's great, everything's working out, everything's great. um it really helps to kind of help me stay in that delusion, I guess. So as long as I was high, for one thing, I was happy because I was dropping massive amounts of weight. And two, it was because the drug gave me this false sense of things were good. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, everything's good. I'm being so productive. This is great, whatever. Okay, in reality, I started 47 different projects in the middle of the night and didn't finish one of them. So that definitely, the methamphetamine, cocaine use, that definitely was kind of piggybacked on my eating disorder. Um, I get my vape to hit. And also just in general, overall risky behavior. And by risky behavior, I mean maybe putting yourself into, you know, less than great situations with some questionable people. You know what I'm saying? Things that may put your safety in jeopardy, but being in that mindset, you do not care. And I feel like being in that traumatic mind state, being, how do I want to explain it? It's almost like you're almost searching for that adrenaline rush, okay? Like something to feel alive, something to feel anything. So, some people ride a roller coaster. Okay, well, I did meth in a cornfield, at 4 o'clock in the fucking morning with people I didn't even know. Um, Years of truancy, lots of going to court, almost going to juvie for missing school, and of course, our lovely U.S. justice system. It was never asked, well, what's going on at home, and I was never given the opportunity to say so. I was just strictly in trouble for missing school. And at that point in time was one of the many times that my mother had filed for divorce from my abusive, malignant, narcissist father and never followed through. Um, Amongst many other things going on at the time. And risky situations, what can I think of? Well, definitely anytime I ever did drugs. Those were never good situations. Um, shouldn't have never been there, but hey, we're there. We live and we learn. Times I could have been arrested. I could have been killed, especially when I was drinking heavily. I would mouth off to people in bars or something that could, very easily have knocked my ass out. You know, Driving intoxicated or getting into the car with other people that were drinking and driving. All these things were manifestations of the unresolved trauma I had. Now, keep in mind, yes, I was overweight. Yes, I did get bullied for being overweight by family and peers. But the older I get, the more so I realized that the eating disorder was not solely to lose weight, which I think for a lot of people it rarely is only that. But it was more so, I'm not a way to have control, definitely. And then also a form of self punishment. And I know that's going to sound weird because I have read so much about eating disorders, so many personal stories, um, literature on the subject in terms of explaining it and treatment and everything. And I've never heard someone say that yet. But a form of self punishment in terms of when you grow up in a um, abusive family system, you go through physical abuse and emotional, sexual, all this, and all these things intertwine to one main theme. I am to blame. I, the child, am to blame that all this stuff happens to me. My parents fight because of me, obviously not. All this bad stuff happens because of me, because I'm a bad kid, because of whatever they told me. And denying yourself food, like the one of the most basic things besides like air and water, you're denying yourself something you are biologically programmed to, need, to want, to do anything to get for self preservation, is that just shut off. There was more, I'd say, through the 13, 14 years of having an eating disorder, I want to say at least 6 of them collectively were me being so thin to the point that if I crossed my legs, it would pinch a nerve and my leg would go numb. Working out for hours and hours, fainting during a workout, waking up, the music still on. Okay, back to it. Of wanting food so bad, but then you walk in the kitchen and, my dad would say I'd get first thing in a week, I'd get something little small. Like one thing that stands out to me is my parents had bought like Burger King, McDonald's, one of the two. I had not literally eaten a bite in weeks. And I'm just like, I'm gonna eat this hamburger, then I'll go exercise, I'll be fine. Whatever. I sat down, took one bite of it, and my dad, oh, you fucking, you're gonna eat all that. Maybe somebody else wanted some. Literally didn't even get a full bite in. I'm like, okay, I'm done, whatever. And that, or other comments from my father, like simple things, like he'd say, it was almost like it was a pleasantry or something, like, oh, hey, will you go get me something to drink, fat fuck? At the point, when I'm visibly underweight and visibly ill, to then enable me to then further self destruct. Not like I didn't have that thought in myself anyway. But really just all of that, and even a lot of times I'd say a lot of that alcoholism too was self punishment. Is I'd see my health failing, I'd see things happening to me, I'd see changes in myself. People around me would tell me these things, but I didn't have the capacity to care, because even my own parents did not care about my well-being. They did not care about my health. um they were direct causes of a lot of health issues I have had and have. um so why would I care? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, you should care, whatever. Again, why growing up in these family dynamics is different than say being with a person like this in an adult relationship when you have something healthy to kind of draw back to is, you grow up, okay, I got to give all this emotional support to my mom. I got to physically and emotionally protect her from my dad. Then I got to protect myself from both of them and my sister. And it was never about me. So then all this came up to where I'm using substances. I have disordered eating. Um, just doing anything, I guess, to kind of feel something, but then doing everything at the same time to feel nothing. Kind of productive, isn't it? Um, whew. Drinking my tea. But really, for me, that's what all of that was: the substance abuse, the eating disorders. When I got down to the depths of it, it was me trying to override the self preservation. That if the people that brought me into this world, if they want, like, if they treated me so terribly, like they didn't even want me to exist, then why should I? You know what I'm saying? But I have to exist, so I'm gonna do everything I can to make it as miserable for myself. And it doesn't make sense. But again, that self blame leads to self punishment, right? Okay, we getting where I'm going? That, all these lovely mechanisms that narcissists and toxic people and abusive people have, they are meant to do that. So all this stuff, while I'm focusing on, trying to starve myself to death or drinking myself to death or whatever, is these people have skirted out on accountability. They have had to take no responsibility for anything, and then now it's just okay, yep, my son, as they always, oh, you look sick, you're a skeleton, okay, versus not actually trying to figure out what was wrong. Or the drunk, the drug addict, but it was never what happened to you. And I noticed that when I was in what was it, March 2023 was my last inpatient hospital stay, and I was in a group setting, and there was a gentleman in there leading the group. I do not believe he was a therapist, counselor, nothing of the sort. I'm not sure what qualification, if any, he had. But he did not like the fact that I had brought up about trauma being a base for most, substance abuse, for addictions. And when you really think about it, I have met all types of people from all different backgrounds, all different stages of life, um, from having a good childhood to a bad one. You know, you don't typically see, if you had a healthy upbringing, a healthy support system, and let's say, I don't think anyone is completely void of trauma, but if you did not go through extreme, what's the word? I guess chronic trauma over the period of years, whatever. You're not going to typically see people that did not have all of those horrible things, that are, drug users or alcoholics or whatever, or kleptomaniacs, anything like any of these addictions. You don't typically see that. Okay, any of you that watch TLC, My 600 Pound Life? Okay, another thing, because I've been at both ends of the weight spectrum, is food is also an addiction. Food, you can be addicted to anything, because it's not all about what it is, it's about you and your mindset and what the point of you doing that act or eating that food or smoking that whatever, drinking that, it is what it does for you. It blocks out the pain, or I don't have to think about it, or whatever it may be. Okay, there you go. They always do therapy for these people, okay? These people that are on that show and they're trying to get the weight loss surgery. And so many of them have a past of one major thing. Can you guess what it is? Oh, wait. Childhood sexual abuse. Wait, so Josh, you're telling me that like people were sexually abused, so then they got really fat? Yeah, yeah. And it's not necessarily the goal necessarily to gain weight, but it is a comfort. Like I've been to that point to where, the only time I was happy was when I was eating, or if I was in a bad mood, I could, make me a sweet treat or whatever, something to eat to make me feel better. And when you go through constant abuse, or you have no outlet or way to cope with the abuse, you will find your own. It is human to try to end your own suffering. So give yourself a break if you've struggled with any of this. It is human nature to try and stop yourself from suffering, like for real. um you just don't see it in people that didn't have trauma. You don't really see these things. So to um for like in that group, for him to say um that didn't have a basis. And keep in mind, I'm in a psychiatric hospital on a substance abuse unit, and you're like literally telling all these people that, which could harm them. Because okay, if you say, oh, that makes kind of sense, like, okay, thinking back, what happened to me that I might be wanting to numb, be wanting to forget, whatever. And then you got someone saying that addiction has no roots in trauma, whatever. And then how healing my inner child changed it all. So I want to say probably I guess the first time I was introduced, not introduced to the topic completely, I had heard of it, but introduced to it in therapy to where I was supposed to partake in something, was a couple years ago. And I had done so much work on every aspect that I could see, right? But I had ignored the ones that I felt. And I was telling this therapist about childhood trauma, things I had been through, things I have seen. And she had suggested, like, kind of trying to bring the inner child out. And she had said, so if you could say one thing to your inner child, to your younger self, to little Josh, what would you say? And I sat there, I started to cry, and I said, help me. That's what he would have said. He would have said, help me. And I lost it. Absolutely, girl. I went delusional as hell. I was already drinking heavily at the point, and then I had kind of like I flatlined. My brain said, "Nope, we're not doing this. This is too painful." I went full on delusional for a matter of probably about a week and a half before I tried to commit suicide and was taken to said psych ward. Um, but then the fact, which I didn't see then, I had actually like been angry at the therapist for even bringing that up. But the fact is, when something brings such an immense wave of an emotion or emotions, that is telling you right there how important it is that you come back to it, that you revisit it. Maybe now's not the time, but it's food for thought. It's something you have to think about, because it's only been about 2 years, 2.5 years that I've really been doing shadow work or inner child work, and it has changed the game. Um, I mean, we're talking, I go to chiropractors once a week for massages and adjustments, um, endless Epsom salt baths and stretching and muscle relaxers, doctors, everything to try and get this immense pain, head to toe pain. I felt probably for the better part of 4 or 5 years, and it only got worse as time went on. Um, I tried everything on a physical um playing field. We'll say that, like the doctors, massage, everything, trying to just treat the symptoms. I guess the physical pain as a symptom, and when I began kind of delving into the inner child stuff, I realized where a lot of my, for instance, my social anxiety came from. Keep in mind, so many of you, I'm sure, especially if you're looking up a video like this, I'm sure you have at least one point in time had experienced social anxiety. And for me, like again, I love to talk about the physical sensations because enough people don't. But you get that anxiety of going into a grocery store, or going to a party to where you don't know everybody. And my thing was always going somewhere and not being there first because you don't want to walk in the door and everyone else is just like, you know what I'm saying? A lot of my social anxiety, that physical anxiety, that itchy burning in my chest, you know, the blood rushing to my face, the feeling like something's around my neck, that had more to do with my inner child than I had realized. That, all these years of hearing things like, um oh, you wearing that, oh, people are gonna think you're gay, people are gonna think you're retarded, people are gonna think you're this, people are gonna think you're that, what would they think about you? And then it gets to the point to where then that's your inner dialogue. So then you're going everywhere and you're thinking, oh, these people are probably thinking the same horrible things about me as that I think about myself, which also those weren't my thoughts, those were instilled there by family. um Social anxiety. Okay, what else? The weight issues again. Like, I did not, looking back on pictures, I was not an overweight kid until after the sexual abuse started. And after the sexual abuse got worse, is I gained more and more and more and more and more and more weight. Um, I lost my place. Bear with me. Um, oh, but those things, that was a protection, okay? But then as I gained weight, I didn't care that I was fat. I didn't even know I was fat. Like, little kids, we don't think like that. Other people tell us what to think. And, hearing from my family that, oh, you're fat. Oh, you're so fat. Oh, you can't do this. You're fat. I wanted to be in gymnastics. I was in gymnastics for a little bit, like maybe a year. And I ended up taking myself out of it because of this inner dialogue that at that point was my parents' voices, and they were never kind. Um, they were always put downs. Oh, you're gonna make an ass out of yourself, whatever. When in reality, what does it matter? What? Who cares? I'll laugh at myself. You know what I'm saying? But it's the point. You tried. You tried to do something that you had an interest in. That wasn't allowed. Um, that inner dialogue that was put there by them, that helps all of this, build the social anxiety, build the, being self-critical, all these things, all these judgments I passed on myself, for one thing, were not mine. And for two things, it all came back to when I was a kid. All these feelings of anxiety and these situations that maybe I guess I consider they should not be anxiety provoking, but they were. And here it came down to because, I still had this inner dialogue that little Josh had heard so often. And until I recognized him, recognized his pain, which I am not finished, not even in the slightest. Um, and by the way, healing, there's never an end point. Never an end point. But back on topic, when I started realizing that these things were tied to how I felt as a child. And the thing is, those of you that have been through childhood trauma, that have been abused as children, that with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and or developmental trauma, and or like trauma long-term sustained trauma. Okay, this is not you get into a relationship with a narcissistic boyfriend or girlfriend, you're together for a year or two, and that's still just as valid, but the symptoms, the aftermath is a little bit more complicated with complex trauma in terms of um the sense of self. Again, you never had a chance to get it. You were built up. How do I want a good analogy? It's like, you're building one of those houses in New Jersey on the boardwalk or something, the one that are built on those piers. Looks like they're on stilts. Okay, you do that, but then you build it, but the piers aren't telephone poles or toothpicks held together with gum. So you're building up this child to then become an adult, but you're building them on such a shaky, fragile, um, unsustainable foundation. So it makes sense that as adults that we cannot fully, you can go to therapy, you can be on medications, you can do all this extensive whatever, but if that is what is the root of causing these things, you have to go back in some way or another. I'm not telling you how, because it's different for anyone. Like I tried EMDR, I've done talk therapy, which I enjoyed talk therapy and benefited from it. But with EMDR therapy, I could not make myself be vulnerable in front of another person, even though this was my long-term therapist and I felt very comfortable around her. She was felt made me feel more comfortable than my own family did. But based on my past, I had grown as like a shield, a suit of armor, a protection is to never show vulnerability. The big thing with that too is crying. Is okay, you got something happen to you where most children are going to cry. You cried, they saw your weakness, they played on it, you realize how much worse it was. So instead, I started feeling anger. And they say anger is disguised hurt. And it is so, so true. Because out of anything, I'm not an angry person. Like, I've been hurt in so many ways, but I am not angry. But when you have, if you don't want to support someone, that's fine. That's your choice. But do not, don't mock them when they cry. Do not call them weak. Crying is the body's natural stress relief. It feels good to cry, especially when you're upset. And just all these things intermingled. That's another thing too, is as an adult, I could not even with my lovely husband here, I was having trouble even feeling true joy. Okay? Like it was hard for me to process negative emotions, but then it was also hard for me to even feel good ones. Um and definitely the changes in that, okay, that this has been a lot recently as well. After cutting off my mother and stuff, that definitely helped when you don't have um kind of an old stagnant thing in the back still kind of spewing hate and bullshit at you. You can, speed up the healing a little bit. Um but I realized after letting out, some very, very big um kind of locked away memories, things that you forget in the conscious, but then when they come up, there's no doubt. There's no doubt you remember it. You remember how it felt. And I got way off topic, but hold on. So where that was supposed to be going was the physical sensations, okay, the anxiety, and where I was going with CPTSD is that the flashbacks aren't always visual. In CPTSD, a lot of the times they are emotional and or somatic flashbacks, meaning that it's something you feel, okay? And somatic, they tend to, like the first time I seen this, I said, well, you saying I'm crazy? You saying that's all in my head? But somatic means kind of like if you say you have somatic pain symptoms, there's not like a physical exam you can do. You know what I'm saying? There's it's caused, by psychological stress or whatever, but it's not, doesn't have a direct, like, bodily cause, I guess, for lack of better words. Um, and all those things tie into what I was saying, because these things, you feel those different physical sensations that you felt as a child in terms of fear, disgust, shame, um, just a whole multitude, but you feel them physically. I tend to feel a lot of that stuff, my chest, my gut, um, just to, it makes you sick. It might upset your stomach. You might have digestive issues, uh, amongst many other things, but that is also just a big differentiating factor between CPTSD and PTSD. And I want a lot of people to understand too, because I was so blinded. I did not know how to deal with it. I did not know what it was. But these things your body is feeling that feel it just downright terrifying, especially when they don't have a name. You're not crazy. They do have a name. And if you are recently out of a traumatic, environment, a traumatic home, a traumatic relationship, whatever, they are probably going to get worse for a while at least. But then healing the inner child, working on it has helped me with that a lot in terms of I have been, I'd say probably 70% pain free just physically. Not all the time, but it's definitely a lot better. Even things as simply as, my appetite changed, my digestion changed in terms of, like, the frequency and or, texture of bowel movements, if you know what I'm saying. Either I was getting diarrhea or not going at all because of stress. Now it's okay, kind of acting normal for the moment. And going into a store, or now this is funny. Going into a store, and I actually ended up being at the pharmacy counter getting my meds, and right next to me was an old friend that I had cut off for reasons of she was not healthy for me. And normally I probably would have shrunken my skin and, oh, whatever, never mind, I'll pick them up later, and left. I didn't feel anything. I didn't, I felt like for once in my life that I could not feel cornered if I did not want to be. That nobody could corner me. Nobody could make me feel less than. Just such a great feeling of, it almost feels like the eyes are finally off me. You know what I'm saying? In terms of a social anxiety perspective, to the more I paid attention to my younger self and the pain he went through and the pain that was still not being heard. Like, dude, I remember being in the car with my mother, whatever reason I was screaming and crying about something, and all she did was turn the stereo up as loud as it would go so she didn't have to hear me cry. Like, those are the memories I have of my mother. And yes, they do outweigh, the good ones, because those were the ones that really stuck. I'm not okay, yeah, I'm gonna remember we went to the zoo every summer, but I'm also gonna remember how you never made me feel heard, you never made me feel safe, all those things. But that's, for me, what my inner child needed to have. He needed to be heard. All this pain, from my childhood, so however many years, had not been heard. So what was it doing? It was coming up, it was festering, it was coming out of every pore, every orifice, everything, in all these different ways: drug abuse, eating disorders, physical health issues, mental health issues, which a lot of things, okay, skip onto this. So the trouble is too, and why you want to see a mental health professional, is that PTSD can mimic mental disorders in terms of, okay, you could have um be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, okay? And that's what I was diagnosed as. But the thing is, these can all be symptoms of post traumatic stress that they can also co-occur. Okay, so you can have bipolar and PTSD. You, I'm assuming, can have schizophrenia, PTSD, and so on. But for me, a lot of these symptoms dropped off the more and the more I worked at it. And I'm a stubborn bitch. I'm a Scorpio. Like I cannot take no for an answer, especially when it comes to me. So it's like, okay, girl, like you got a couple of stuff here, so where's the rest? Like a clown pulling that never ending, like, cloth out of its mouth, whatever it is. So much of that subsided. So much of it. Like it's still there, of course, but so much of it. And like I talked about in my last video, even feelings of like when I would tell my best friend or my husband something I was reliving and talking out with them, that I had feelings of they're not going to think about me the same now. They know to the extent of what you were sexually abused, they're not going to view you the same again. They're going to think you're disgusting. That was the abuser's voice. That was the enabler's voice. My mother, my father, my sister, that was their voices, because that is what abusers and enablers do to keep the victims, I hate that word, but keep the victim of the abuse silent. Because if you think and you truly believe, after years of indoctrination and gaslighting, that what happened to you is shame on you, you won't tell anybody. You won't ask for help. Because again, shame is that public emotion. We don't want people to see our shame. And it truly does feel like we're wearing, it on our sleeve, or, a big old shirt that says, I'm ashamed of what happened to me. But the thing is, good people, supportive people, they're not going to think like that. And to start off, you have to do that for yourself. Like a big help was my support system, small as it may be. It is so valued in my heart, because these people have lifted me up when I didn't even think I could wake up. You know what I'm saying? Um, this shame about telling our story and about even talking to others, telling someone, like when I first said the words out loud to my therapist, I think I was 19, like I was molested as a child. This is who did it. This is what happened. And on, of course, a couple of the occasions, and to speak that out loud for the first time honestly made it too real at first, to the point that if I did not speak it out loud, that I could continue to push it back. And that was something that contributed to my lack of interest in sex all these years, as well as promiscuity. There's so many different ways that you wouldn't even imagine that sexualhood abuse, or sexualhood childhood sexual abuse, or just in general childhood abuse, can come up to affect your everyday life. And that shame of, what will people think of me? It should be, what will people think of them? And whatever they think of them is exactly right. Because the thing is, it is never you. If you were abused, never you. There should be no shame, no judgment passed on the person that was abused. I do not care. It is always the abuser's fault. It is always their fault, especially as children. I don't care what happened to you. Again, we'll say this in every video. I don't care what happened to your parents. I don't care what kind of life they had. I don't care if they had a terrible upbringing. I don't care if people were mean to them in school. It is your responsibility as an adult to either deal with it, or at the very least, not let it traumatize your children as well. That is why I am here. That is why you guys are here looking up videos like this, because you don't want to be your parents, or you don't want to be, someone who continues the abuse, because you were taking the responsibility as an adult to figure out how you tick, figure out why, and change it. And that is what makes you so vastly different from the abusers that have hurt you, that have hurt me, that have hurt all these other people. That is the difference, because some people can change, most people don't. And I'm so happy that you guys are here with me on the side of people that do.